We're in the studio today with Poornima Vijayashanker. She's the CEO and founder of BizeeBee, focusing on management and membership services software for small and medium businesses. And she's also the second employee at Mint.com. Welcome to the studio, Poornima.
Thanks for having me.
So one of the larger issues in Silicon Valley in the tech world today, in the startup world, is sort of this issue of women in technology, women founders, technical women in the industry. And so I think what would be helpful to start off the conversation is to kind of dial the clock back a little bit and sort of explain to the audience how you got into technology to begin with.
Sure. Well, I was a bit fortunate growing up because my dad's actually a hardware engineer. So around the dinner table, we always talked about the big tech companies that he worked for, like Sony, TI, Samsung, and I just grew up with that. I got to see my first fab when I was about 8 years old, and my brother and I did zany things like take our computers apart. So growing up, there was a lot of tech focus. That's not to say I wanted to be an engineer. It wasn't until I got to college and took my first computer science class that I actually got interested in technology as a career.
So now you were in high school, or as you were growing up in middle school, high school, were you exposed to computers and were you learning programming at that time, or only when you applied to college and enrolled?
So I did do some basic programming in HTML, and back then we had GeoCities. So I did that sort of stuff. But
okay, but for how long?
Probably less than 6 months.
Okay.
I never took a high school CS class, and I certainly wasn't sitting there and hacking away at my laptop. It was the kind of thing that I only learned to do when I got to college.
And how did you decide from the moment when you graduated high school and you were going to go to college that you were going to focus on, you did electrical engineering and computer science, right? So how did you decide that's it, or did you pick a number of different majors?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
And all through high school, I did speech and debate. So when I got to college, though, I wasn't too keen on becoming a lawyer because I felt like I wasn't going to be building something, and I really wanted to build. And computer science gave me that outlet. And so once I started with CS, then I just fell in love with building software, and then realized I really wanted EE because I wanted to know not only how to build programs, but how to build computers and systems. So that's why I decided to do the double major. Okay,
and so you finished up college, and then what did you do? What was your next career move?
Sure. So the minute I decided I was going to be an engineer, I knew I wanted to be in California.
Okay.
One, because it's the tech capital of the world, and two, I was just always fascinated by the startup scene as well as the fact that there's so many companies that form here all the time. And so I made the long trek out from Duke to California, and my first job was actually as an R&D engineer at Synopsys, which does CAD tools. So It was a good integration of my CS and EE background, and I spent about 2 years working there.
Okay, and then your next move?
Yeah, and then I went to Stanford. Actually, while I was still at Synopsys, I did a part-time master's. And I did that primarily because I really wanted to get into the startup scene, and I thought it was the best way, just because so many Stanford grads, starting with the HP guys all the way to the Google guys, were from Stanford. So I thought there's got to be something in the water there, and maybe if I take some classes or meet people, I'll be able to get into the scene.
Okay, and then how long? Now you left the program at Stanford, right? You dropped out to join Mint as their second employee.
Yeah.
So walk us through that decision.
Sure.
Did you agonize over leaving your master's program, or did you just say, hey, this is what I'm here for and I'm going to go for it?
Well, since I only went to the program because I wanted to get into the startup scene, it was a pretty simple decision in that I wanted to be at Mint. I love the idea from the minute Aaron introduced it to me, and I just wanted to really be building and also in industry. So leaving wasn't really hard. It was I'd taken a few classes, gained some skills in web development, and now I wanted to put it into practice.
Okay, and so now that you founded now your own company after Mint was acquired by Intuit, and I want to get to that in a minute.
Sure.
I'd like to hear broadly, if we step back a minute and just say, okay, well, you've obviously been noticing a lot of the debates around women in technology. It seems to come up once every 3 or 4 months, right? And it seems to get louder and louder, right? And so maybe something is happening. You do a lot of work outside of BizeeBee, right? And outside of being an engineer and founder to mentor and interact with the community. Can you share a little bit, what are the types of things you do and how long you've been doing it for and what you've learned from it?
Yes. So right about the time I started at Mint, I was on an all-guy team, and it wasn't like a new thing to me because I was used to that in college and at my first job.
Right.
But I really wanted to have a forum where I could showcase that you can be a girl and be in engineering. And so I started my blog, femgineer.com, and the whole purpose of it was not to bitch or gripe. It was just like, let's talk tech and let's talk what it's like to start companies and build products. So that became the focus, and it's been going on for 5 years now. And just over the course of writing, people were contacting me and asking me questions and asking me to come speak. And so it basically morphed into me becoming a lot more of a role model or a figure in the area. And so what I do now is I go to conferences like the one I went to on Saturday at Stanford, She++. There's one at Berkeley as well about a month ago, where I just talk about, this is what it's like to be in tech, and these are the types of jobs that are available to you, and this is kind of how you set yourself up, whether it's a CS degree or product design. Give people who are in college an understanding of what the major is going to translate to when it comes to practice, so being in industry.
So now that you've been blogging for 5 years and you've been very generous with your time to speak to either students or post-grads who are looking for advice, what are the common types of questions that come up?
Sure.
Like what do you hear most often, and then how do you respond to that?
Sure. So the first is like people just have no insight into what a software engineer does or what other jobs there are in tech. So a lot of it is just, look, here's what startup life is like. Here are the kinds of skills that you need, and they're not just coding in Rails or Java or anything like that. There's more. There's being able to wireframe, do usability tests. So a lot of it is just getting people acquainted with here's what life is like. And then the other part of that is there's a lot of anxiety, right? So a lot of people come in and they say, well, I don't know if I want to work at a startup or a big company. What's the different dynamic? And it's also exposing, well, what is it you want out of your career? Do you want to be an entrepreneur, or are you really happy being specialized or just really solving big problems in the world?
So now this sounds like a lot of more generalized advice, but if we get specific into, let's say people who are reading your blog, or I would imagine mostly maybe women who are in high school or in college or just leaving, who are technical, right? What are the questions that come up?
Yep.
With that group?
So some people actually ask some pretty hard-hitting questions. There's this phenomenon right now that's going on. I think it happens with both women and men, and that's that first year CS class that they take. They come in and they're like, I have never coded before, and I don't even know where to begin. And I've done all these Google searches, but there's so much content out there, and I don't want to appear dumb in the class. And so part of it is just me saying, look, take that first project, learn that first language, and then you can build upon it. No one's going to look at you and say, why don't you have an entire string of keywords in your resume from your first CS class? And you also aren't expected to know everything when it comes to attending that class. It's really meant to be an intro level. And so part of it is just reducing their anxiety and telling them it's a building process. You learn the fundamentals, then you're going to learn actually how to create a program, and then from there you're going to learn the entire computer architecture and kind of walking them through that. But really the focus is just saying, like, take a class, see what it's like. If you like to build stuff, heck, even if you like to cook, programming is a lot like cooking. You grab your ingredients, you read a recipe, that's what an algorithm is, and making it that simple helps them understand, okay, I'm willing to take a shot. I'm willing to sit through this first class and then go from there. And that's a lot of what I do when I mentor hands-on. The blog itself, though, is a little more focused on, like, here's what life is like at a startup.
Sure.
So
maybe let's dig into that, the other side of the coin of, like,
sure.
Sort of more personal things or lifestyle things that you've noticed being in the startup world. Obviously it's male-dominated, right? And we can say that. What are some lessons or advice that you impart from your experience to people who maybe ask you about that?
Yeah. Well, I would say a lot of it is what is it that you want in your life? If you want to be at that startup that's really changing the world and is going at a really fast pace, there are a lot of those to choose from in the Valley, and it's up to you to get out there and promote yourself either as a developer or a designer or whatever your skill set is. But there are also a number of startups that are bootstrapped or have been around for a while and are making a lot of progress. And so if you don't want to be on that fast track and you would rather still have the ability to make a change in the world, you can choose from those. So I think a lot of it is exposing like there's not one type of startup out there, and if you want to have the basically freedom to affect your end users and make change, that's what a startup is for. It's to be able to do that. It's to be able to have that immediate connection with a customer, which you don't necessarily get working at a larger company or if you have more specialized skills.
Sure.
So that's
and
the first.
What about the more personal side of it, right? Lifestyle choices that either you've made or that that your career has afforded you, right?
Sure.
And maybe talk about the more personal side.
Sure. Yeah. When I left Mint, it was pretty much to start my own because I'd had the experience as a founding engineer and liked seeing the evolution of an entire product from prototype to launch and then acquisition. But I wanted something different. I wanted to build a business that would grow with my lifestyle. And at the time, it was, I have a lot of different interests. I like to mentor. I like to speak on a number of topics. I love yoga, and I love spending time with my friends. And so I don't want to be at another startup where I'm sort of forced to go by whatever the founder's schedule is. I want something where I can establish a business and one that's still going to become big, but it's operating on my time frame.
And so how do you think a career in technology affords that?
Sure.
Let's just say specifically for women.
Yeah.
Right? I mean.
Sure. So the first thing is I've got a remote team, and my remote team's primarily on the West Coast, but I've noticed that my employees are just really happy when they don't have to commute. And so everybody logs in, they do their work, and then they can go out and do what they need to. So I think flexibility is really important, especially for women, and especially for that group that's like 20 to 30 where they might be starting families or they might be even thinking of starting families, right? They want some freedom, and they don't want to be chained to a desk or even chained to a particular environment that they have to be somewhere. Instead, they want to get work done still. They want to be productive. They want to be contributors. And technology and being able to log in from anywhere or work from anywhere gives them that ability to do so.
But you're saying specifically for people who are technically,
Yeah.
who are working in technical professions.
Right, and that can be anything. I mean, that can still be marketing, and that can be software engineers.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be one versus the other.
Sure.
But yeah, being in a startup or being in a tech company gives you a lot more flexibility, just given the way that they think about how work is going to be done. And the other is that it's a pretty progressive industry when it comes to making sure that there is work-life balance, and also making sure that you're working when you're most effective rather than like punching a clock.
Sure. And let's sort of wrap up and talk a little bit about what you're working on now, where the majority of your focus is on BizeeBee. You mentioned it, we talked about earlier, it's a software company helping small, medium businesses sort of manage their memberships. Sort of tell us a little bit about BizeeBee, who's using it, and dig in a little bit as to like what it's like to actually, build a company. Right?
Yeah. Well, the first is that it's extremely gratifying to see an idea and start from nothing and then have it affect hundreds, if not millions of lives. So I've always been a fan of that, and with BizeeBee I get to do that. BizeeBee itself is member management. So we basically help small businesses or organizations like fitness studios, even continuing education and professional services like acting coaches and writing workshops. And the big problem these folks have today is their data is everywhere. There's too many different tools, and so it really makes it hard for them to keep track of their customers, get them to come back, and even do simple things like get paid on time. And so BizeeBee just streamlines the entire process, puts all of that into one product, and then lets them do what they do best, which is teaching and interacting with their customers.
Sure. And how did you get the idea for BizeeBee?
Sure.
Like, how did it come about?
So basically, I'd been doing yoga for about 8 years, and I just kept seeing the same problems everywhere I went, whether it was in the US or outside. All these yoga studios I went to couldn't get their people to come back after an introductory special, or they just couldn't get paid on time, or were using software that was really old or had an install base. And so I was like, there's got to be a better way. I looked around for some products, even consulted for a number of these businesses, and found out that there wasn't a lot in this space. And so that was the inspiration to start BizeeBee.
And how much do you think that idea process to get to BizeeBee was influenced also by your time at Mint, right? Which is kind of focused on, focused broadly on finance and then was acquired by Intuit. I mean, how is that experience informing what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, the first thing is that Mint taught me really how to build a product from scratch. And so that really helped tremendously, and that's one of the reasons I went there. So that's the first. The second is at Mint, I learned so much about financial tech, which is becoming more and more prevalent in the industry today. So I learned everything from, managing a transaction stream and the growth of that to a lot around security. Mint was really the forefront of managing people's personal data that was really confidential. So I learned a ton of security information. And then the other thing was also, how do you take complex data? Personal finance, a lot of numbers, people hate doing these kinds of things, and make it interesting, make it fun, and more importantly, make it simple, right? People don't want to do their taxes, they don't want to do their accounting. So what can you do to make it really push button? And those are the same lessons I apply at BizeeBee. It's how do you take that business management, the hard parts of managing a small business, and make it super simple for these people that are strapped by cash and by time.
Okay, great. And so final question is, you're doing a lot of mentorship. You've touched a lot of people already through the blog and through speaking. This is another chance to maybe talk to the audience. Like, what would you say if someone's out there just on the verge of wanting to join a startup or wanting to start their own thing like you finally did? What would be your parting advice to them?
I think the most important thing is don't overthink it. I think people sometimes worry well, I don't have all the pieces in place. You basically need to just go for it, and you need to make sure that you've got a good support system. And that can be advisors, mentors, even other founders out there. I think it's a really nurturing community. So being able to just say, hey, I'm stuck, once you get stuck is great. But there's never going to be a good time. So you might as well just jump in if you are excited about an idea and if you think you can make it happen.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Poornima, and good luck.
Yep. Thank you.